Welcome to Let's Talk Wellness. It's time to have new conversations about mental health. Join Mara James as she guides us along this journey. And now, let's talk wellness.
Hi everybody, it's Mara James, and today our guest is Wynford Dore. Wynford is an out-of-the-box researcher, founder of Zing Performance, and a board member at the Reach Institute. I would say good morning, good afternoon, or maybe it's even good evening for you since you're in London. Hi, Wynford.
Hi, Mara. Good to see you.
You too. How are you doing this evening?
Oh, it's just been another wonderful day and delving into how we can find even better ways of helping people's mental health.
Amen. You are talking my language. So let's dive right in and talk about how to increase mental strength. Where do you begin?
Well, first of all, we've got to start rethinking the concepts. We've got a very clear concept about physical strength. We know eat properly, do the right exercises, and you increase your physical strength. We don't have that same concept for mental health. We assume that mental health at best is fixed and is kind of like a glass ceiling, and that's the way it is. And the best that can happen is that you find some drugs or some therapies to help you cope with any reduction in your mental strength. I want to blast a big hole in that glass ceiling and say, yes, we now know how to increase mental capacity. We know how to increase mental strength. And when you accept that concept, you suddenly realize, wow, this opens up so many exciting opportunities for us to deal with all of the things that limit our mental faculties. So that's what I'm researching. It's extremely exciting. I think I'm at cutting edge, and I can see just some exciting changes in our whole understanding of mental health in the very, very near future.
Yeah, and it's interesting as we're talking about mental strength. I always think about the brain, though. With me, a lot of mental emotions come from the heart. Are we thinking like, oh, how do I become smarter? Is that part of mental strength, or is that something entirely separate?
No, it's actually all very connected. Look, mental capacity is, do we have the mental space, the bandwidth to deal with what the world is throwing at us right now, what I want to achieve right now? And when we run out of mental capacity, that's when we go into emotional overload. We simply don't have enough bandwidth. So the link between emotions and mental capacity is very clear. Our mental capacity is really here, what we have in the prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of the brain. If that is full of stuff that shouldn't be there, need not be there, as soon as we run out, we've lost emotional control. But there's other things that go wrong. When you run out of space here, this is where our executive functions are. So issues with attention, issues with impulsivity, issues with general decision-making, issues with inhibitory control, all of those things here, memory function, it's all influenced by what is happening here. So to me, when I talk about mental capacity, I'm really thinking about how much spare space have we got? You know, this is the bit that we address when we try and do mindfulness or meditation. This is what we're trying to empty out so that we can have clear space. Well, that's not the only way to achieve clear space. So that's what I've been working on, Mara, is how we can increase our available mental capacity.
And this is not something, I assume, that's measurable.
Yes.
Oh, it
yes.
is.
Oh, there's plenty of tools. Look, I'm nuts about data.
Yeah.
Some people think I'm a bit off the wall because I look in corners others have never bothered to look. And when you're a bit off the wall, people start initially assuming, oh, this can't be right because it contradicts everything we've been told. Then a few years later, the neuroscience catches up and they say, oh, wow, you can do the things that I've been working on, which is increase neuroplasticity at any age. In other words, make us ready to grow and strengthen all of our mental faculties, all of our cognitive processes. So that's now possible at any age. And that's what I've been working on. Obviously, I accept that medication is critical sometimes. I really do. But I always prefer to find a natural, lasting solution. So my obsession has been all about the role of the cerebellum. I don't know if you've ever studied the cerebellum, Mara. Please have a good look at it. Anybody that's interested in mental health should look at the cerebellum. It's only 10% of the volume of the brain. But would it shock you if I said it was close to 3/4 of all our brain cells?
Wow, I'm right. I'm actually taking notes as we're talking. So if I'm looking down, yeah. Wow. Wow. Okay. I did
So
not
this
know.
is a crucially important part of the brain that for many years, and in fact, some still think it's all about coordinating our balance and our movements. No, no, no. It's far more than that. The cerebellum does coordinate our movements and balance, but that's only a small part of its responsibility. It coordinates everything. And guess what? The more coordinated we are in our cognitive processes, the more intelligent we are, the better our skills, the better our performance mentally and physically, and the more capacity we have to be on top. So when you think about issues like anxiety and depression and bipolar and so on, they're all linked to low levels of available mental capacity. And yes, you can measure this. So when I work with people, I always measure their mental capacity and show them this is where you're at. And I use the tools that neuroscientists use regularly around the world. I use the same tools because they work and they're reliable.
And give us an example what this tool looks like. How does the testing work?
Well, there are certain simple games which so we build all of those into apps and so on to make people so that people can just measure for themselves. Okay, how much mental capacity do I really have? And mental capacity is actually a reflection of mental strength, mental resilience. And because when that goes up, your strength and resilience goes up. So they're games. They look like simple computer games, but of course they're designed by universities to reliably measure available mental capacity at any moment. They're snapshots, but they're very, very good and very reliable snapshots. So if when I'm putting people through programs, I always get some figures at the end to start. What's your auditory working memory capacity? What's your visual working memory capacity? And then again at the end, we measure it again. And we're making typically 30 centile differences. That's huge. So if somebody starts off, they're struggling with various capacity, maybe they're measuring 20 at the 20th centile, which means they're well below average. Typically, we'll get them to the 50th centile pretty quickly. That's a huge change in their mental capacity.
Wow. And what ages would you test? Do you do children, teens?
The youngest we can do is 7, and the reason for that at the moment, the reason for that, Mara, is the cerebellum is itself rapidly developing up to the age of 7. It slows down then, so we wait until the cerebellum is itself reasonably stable before we start working on them to further enhance. We actually the exercises we do have been shown to increase stem cells in the cerebellum and other critical parts of the brain. That's
Wow.
awesome. We do that with exercises. When you've got neuroplasticity at any age, you increase the chances of the brain developing some exciting new connections, new synapses. And those new connections are more capacity, it's more performance, it's more strength, and so on. And the upper age, well, we haven't found an upper age. There was a point when I thought it was 16, and then we realized older people in their 20s could do it. Then we realized people in their 40s could still benefit. And then one day I was giving a talk, and a lovely old lady came up to me and she said, I want to do these exercises. I want to read and write before I die. And I was taken aback a bit because she was clearly in her 80s. And I said, these are exercises. I don't want you to hurt yourself. And she said, let me stop you there. She said, I get hurt more every day because I can't do those things that everybody else finds easy. I want to do your exercises. I said, okay, you can do my exercises. And 4 months later, she was on breakfast television in Britain, holding up the first letter she had written in her life.
Um,
Now, her daughter rang me 2 years later And she said, "Do you remember Liz Percy?" I said, "Yeah, how is she?" She's reading and writing in 3 languages.
Oh
So
my goodness.
that was at the age of 84. So my point is, age does not stop the ability, hinder the ability to create neuroplasticity. You know, what we know about neuroplasticity has been transformed this last 10 years or so. And the fact that we now know the things that can stimulate you, so you create it. You know, neuroplasticity, we have tons of it when we're babies.
Mhm.
Babies, they come out helpless, can't do anything. Within 2 years, they're smiling and talking and walking and starting to socialize, and all of that's happened because of very high levels of neuroplasticity. It declines during childhood, declines a lot more during puberty. But then if you imagine if you can resurrect that and saying, hey, I don't want to wait. I want more capacity in my brain. I can use it right now, especially those that are struggling with stress and overwhelm. If you can give them greater mental capacity so they start to feel on top without the need for medication, how precious is that? So we're working with folk who've been sadly abused. We're working with people who have been at war and have tried every other intervention, and it's not been powerful enough. Well, this magical combination of adding neuroplasticity to already well-known and effective interventions, it just 10x's it.
Amazing. Amazing. And how long, is there a time frame that it takes for someone, or is everyone different to build it up?
Yeah, everyone is different. Look, people want quick results these days. They want to be able to take a pill and get an instant result. Well, I'm saying, you know what? Can't quite do it that fast. But if you've say if your biggest issue is significant stress and overload, then 30 days we can transform that.
Wow.
If it's ADHD symptoms, you know, we're working now with the famous Dr. Ned Hallowell, who I think is the biggest name in the world in ADHD. He's
Okay.
sold at least 5 million books on the topic. He's now launched an app using the research I've been doing for the last 25 years, the Hallowell app, all about ADHD. It's transformational. That takes 90 days. But if you've got very significant signs of autistic signs and you want to reduce some of those symptoms, then I've known people do my program for 10 minutes a day for 3 years and still, in fact, I watched a lad do that. He did it for 6 months and he was transformed. He was socializing better and enjoying life and learning and so on, and reading and writing. But he so loved the process, he carried on. After 2 years, I said to him, I don't think you're going to get any more benefit. So I don't want to build up your hopes. He said, no, I'm enjoying doing it. I like it. And sure enough, 6 months later, he developed a sense of humor for the first time.
What? And the program, is it something they're working in with person, or is it a computer program, or is it an app?
Yeah, it's actually a program that's led by a coach. All of the exercises we prescribe are very personalized because every brain is different. Every brain requires different types of stimulation to get the development at the right point. We're literally increasing the density of gray matter in critical parts of the cerebellum. So it's very personalized. The exercises themselves are delivered in an app, so it's easy. But we get everyone supervised by a coach so that they do the right thing, they're motivated, they understand what's happening. And so so someone with ADHD symptoms, they'll see a coach 3 or 4 or 5 times, and as they're led through the process. But the daily communication is all done in an app. You can do it wherever you are. You don't need to go to clinics or see doctors or other specialists. You can do it all alone.
Amazing. All those people that are always asking, like, this is amazing technology. It must cost a fortune, and we know insurance probably doesn't cover it. Am I allowed to ask what
Yeah,
the ballpark is for the?
you absolutely can. Well, first of all, Medicare now covers our program for Medicare Part B, I think it is, covers our program for seniors to recover balance, recover memory, recover confidence, and do all of the assessments around that. So, you know, things are moving. This has only just happened in recent weeks. Medicare has given us the codes so that for all the appropriate tests, so if someone's on Medicare B, insurance does cover it. Look, I want to get this so that all insurance covers it.
Sure.
But, you know, why did I do this? I did this because my daughter attempted to take her life.
And I was going to say what I was going to ask you,
And
what set you on this path? How old was she?
she was, well, she was in her late teens, and I've got 4 children. She was the oldest. They all had the same teachers, same parents, and yet she was the one that struggled to learn. She seemed bright. She actually bypassed some of her crawling, which gave me a clue that some of the development wasn't quite right. And sure enough, when she got to school, learning to read and write was much harder than it should be. Learning to concentrate was very hard. In her case, she also didn't, well, she didn't develop many things, but she has now, because when we continue the development of the cerebellum, and she is so happy and so positive now. But the issue is that when someone is facing those issues, they do need a warrior parent to hold their hand. And there's a big gap between warrior parents and not warrior parents. You know, there's warrior parents. The non-warrior parents, they're the ones who say, oh, the school will sort it out. And of course, the school haven't got the tools to sort it out, or the medical profession will sort it out. So we generally only work with warrior parents who say, do you know what? I'm going to make sure my child does this for 5 minutes a day to complete the development of the critical parts of the brain, to nurture it and so on. So, you know, I think I had to become a warrior parent because my daughter attempted to take her life. But do you know what it's done for me, Mara? It's made me very sensitive about what families face. So we make this as inexpensive as possible. It's literally only a few $100s in America, and it comes with a money back guarantee. If we don't make a significant difference, people don't pay. You know, that comes from my heart. I can't watch. In fact, I don't have to. People don't ask us for money back because it works. You know, when you understand the neuroscience and you make it work, yeah, people have got to do the exercises. If they don't do the exercises, it's not going to work. But if they comply and do it, then, and it's only 10 minutes a day for a few months, then the transformation is huge. The wonderful thing about the cerebellum, Mara, is that when you make changes to the cerebellum, they last. So for instance, a common skill that most of us have that the cerebellum develops is riding a bike. So if you learn to ride a bike at age 6 or 7, and in my case at 17, when I got my first car, I put my bike in the shed, forgot about it until I was about 40, and then realized I needed some exercise. I pumped up the tires and I jumped on and I rode. And that's the wonderful thing about the cerebellum. You create lasting change. And that's amazing about this whole process, that focuses on developing the very bit of the brain that creates lasting benefits for all of your cognitive functions.
This is amazing. And, you know, we're going to take a brief break. And when we come back, I want to discuss neuroscience and what I like to say, call woo-woo. So everybody stay tuned. We'll be right back.
We hope that you're enjoying today's Let's Talk Wellness podcast. And if you have a topic that you would like us to explore, we would love to hear from you. Simply email us at info@elfempowers.org. That's info@elfempowers.org. And now, back to the show.
Welcome back. I'm Mara James, and today we're speaking with our guest, Wynford Dore. Welcome back, Wynford.
Hi, Mara. Great to be with you.
So much goodness. Oh my goodness, where do I begin? Let's start talking about neuroplasticity.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a name for your program, your app, and meditation, and how they are similar, how they're different.
Okay, well, the name for the app, because I'll probably forget if I don't say it now, it's Zing, Z-I-N-G Performance, Zing Performance. And you want to talk about neuroplasticity?
Yeah, let's talk about that, and then how Zing helps that, and also about, because there's a big buzz out there, right? Meditation and all of that yoga. So comparing the two.
Well, okay, there are two different topics. Neuroplasticity is flooding the brain, is the process of flooding the brain with all of the raw materials needed to create large numbers of new cells and new connections.
Okay.
And when I first was given the challenge to help my daughter, I had that phone call that said she'd attempted to take her life,
Mm.
and uh, I was just in a flat panic. But on the drive to the hospital, which took me 2 hours, I
Oh,
decided that she was already there. She was taken there. I was on business 2 hours away, and on that journey, of course, I went through all of the things that I'd tried, and did I try everything? Was there anything I could have tried that I knew about that so you imagine the guilt I was feeling.
oh,
I was
yeah.
running a very successful business, but I got a daughter that was very unhappy, that didn't want to live. And one of the experts told me very cruelly, she's got to learn to live with her problems. And I'm saying, she's depressed. She's telling the world her problems are too bad to live with. So on the way to the hospital, I committed that should God allow her to live, I was going to sell my businesses and I was going to devote my life to finding out why it was that Susie couldn't learn. And so I got to the hospital. My younger daughter met me at the car park and said, she's coming round. They think they're going to save her. And my life had changed. So it took me a while, but I sold my other businesses. And since then, all I've done is find neuroscientists who understand, who are at cutting edge. And one particular amazing neuroscientist based in the north of England, Professor Nicholson, he has been my mentor ever since, and he's plugged me into all of the research. What I discover, Mara, and this is a little bit scary, around the world, there are amazing neuroscientists who create amazing pieces of research, rather like pieces of sophisticated jigsaw, but nobody's doing the jigsaw. So I was
Mhm.
going around the world finding these pieces and saying, well, neuroplasticity actually links with the development of the cerebellum. The development of the cerebellum increases skills like reading and concentration. And when you do that, you reduce the amount of capacity that's used up inappropriately in your thinking brain. So you free up your executive functions, which helps with attention and impulsivity and so on. I found all these pieces of jigsaw linked together. So I'm not a brilliant neuroscientist. What I'm very good at is doing jigsaws. And so I sit on the shoulders of these neuroscientists, bringing it together. And I've got some amazing ones now who have joined my scientific advisory board. I'm very, very blessed, very, very blessed. Whatever I've got a problem with, I can just talk to one of them and they point me in the right direction. So things are moving. Is it reaching everybody yet? Absolutely not. Are there people? There are myriads from school age to middle age to old age struggling with mental health issues. And we have the knowledge, we have the neuroscience, we have the tools that could transform it for them. So my frustration is it's not reaching the people that need it fast enough. And that's my job. So thank you for inviting me on. And I hope your audience will take a good look at this, because for many of them, it'll be a massive relief. And some get angry and say, why has nobody told me this before? Well, okay.
Right. Yeah, because people don't know. And that, I always say pain is inevitable, suffering is optional, and healing is possible. And to help
Yeah.
spread this news is so profound. And I'm sorry, I guess for both of us, what we had to go through with our children. We don't wish upon our worst enemy, but it helps us do our,
Yeah.
work. So
Well,
I love that you have a place in your heart. You're not about the dollar. You're about really helping people suffer less.
Well, fortunately, I've still got other businesses which are kind of looking after me and giving me more money to throw at brain research. I own some private schools in England, which are wonderful. So some of my principles get used there, of course.
Yeah.
And so I'm very into education and very into mental health. But you asked about meditation and
Yes.
mindfulness. And so when you go through this process, when you create neuroplasticity, when you drive the development of the cerebellum, various things happen. Increasing the density of gray matter in the cerebellum means it can do its job better. It creates better skills. And one of the important things is the better your skills, the less you have to fill up your prefrontal cortex, your thinking brain, with stuff that shouldn't be there. Well, when you empty your prefrontal cortex naturally and permanently, when you free it up, you've got more mental capacity. It gets you
Mhm.
closer to a meditative state. That's what
Ah,
mindfulness is. So this whole process is a natural way of getting you to a point where you have the feeling of being so on top of what is happening to you. So I've got a lot of friends who are keen meditators, and they all, many of them at different times say, "Oh, you ought to meditate more." I'm saying, well, actually, the process I've gone through has got me to much closer to a meditative state all the time.
amen.
And so I've teased some of them, and I've thrown a challenge and said, you do my process and see how much you need to meditate to have the same level of peace. And most of them have the good grace to come back to me and say, do you know what? I can achieve just as much now with a lot less meditating. So I'm a big
Oh,
fan of meditating, but I'm saying, why not go through a process where you're naturally closer, you're almost permanently in a more mindful state?
and that means more blissful.
More blissful, yeah. Well,
Uh,
okay, that's an interesting point. What is happiness? What is confidence? When the prefrontal cortex, because of the underdevelopment of the cerebellum, if the prefrontal cortex ends up being pretty full most of the time, then your self-belief and your happiness is low. Your happiness is highest, your self-belief and confidence is highest when you've got plenty of space here. So that's one of the first things we had to learn. We were doing a big research project in a school, and all these children, they'd been struggling and struggling, and then they did my program for a few months. And when we had doing the final measures, into the room walked all of these happy, confident children. And so we were collecting measures on happiness, and we were saying their happiness has gone through the roof. So we had to go to the professors, the neuroscientists, what's happening? So they had to explain to us, this is what's happening. Happiness will correlate to available mental capacity to deal with whatever life is throwing at you at any time.
becoming more resilient. I love it. What's better than happy? I always say as a parent, we're only as happy as our saddest child, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
yeah, wow. So that brings me, so we're talking about schools, and you have one book that's already out. I know you're working on a second one. I believe it's called Stop Struggling in School.
Yeah, Stop Struggling in School was really focused on all of the common issues that we put labels to. I'm not a fan of labels because the labels were developed long before we understood the neuroscience of what was actually going on. And so I must just step in here. If any of your listeners have got a child that's struggling with ADHD or dyslexia, all of the symptoms, and you should start looking at your child in a different way, because to me, those symptoms are simply a sign of huge potential.
Yeah, all the gifted children are not being diagnosed this day and age.
So if you can work on developing the cerebellum,
Mhm.
naturally, the skills that they've been lacking will start to develop. And I think you should always drive the development of a child's cerebellum before you get them diagnosed. Because diagnosis is a bit like a tattoo across the forehead. It's there for life. You can't get rid of it. But is it fair to diagnose someone if many of the symptoms can be transformed by development? These are not diseases. When I started working with dyslexia and ADHD and all of the symptoms of poor reading and concentration, low self-esteem, and poor social skills and so on, I thought I was dealing with diseases.
Yeah,
No, we're dealing with just unfinished development. That's all. Incomplete development. That's all it
love
is. So if you can drive the development, show the potential. So when I see a child now, when a mum brings a child to me, say, can you help my child? All I see on this child is a big flag saying massive potential just waiting to be discovered. Because,
yeah,
why is it that the billionaires in this world don't often read for pleasure? Why is it that many who go through school, failing through school, become hugely successful? I mean, many who go through school failing, they end up in prison or underachieving. So that's tragic and sad. But our education system is not finding potential. We got brilliant teachers, but they're not given the tools to find out, is the development complete? What
yeah,
could we do? So you can have a very powerful computer, but if the internet connection isn't brilliant, you're wasting your time. Well, the same is true of children. If their input and output isn't very developed, so their ability to read and write isn't highly developed. We assume they're not intelligent. But the irony is, it's often those children that have the deepest creativity, the deepest, strongest, real intelligence. And our school system misses it. But if we're fortunate, it shows later on in life. But sadly, for some, they never discover that potential. I want to change all that. Our education system needs turning upside down.
Yes, otherwise we're trying to put that square peg into the round hole, and we don't want them to fit there. We want them to be different. And, yeah, schools are definitely based on the older, reading, writing, arithmetic, and there's so much more, as we know, the art side, the emotional quotient more than the intellectual.
Well, talk to teachers, Mara, ask them, how much training did you have on special needs?
Yeah.
The most you ever hear is, oh, I had half a day.
Right. Well, and that reminds me, my husband's an OBGYN, and how much training did you have in medical school on mental health? Right? A couple of weeks at the VA, which was totally different. Yeah. But that's what we get to do. We get to come and educate. So let me ask you, so Dr. Vivek Murthy, US Surgeon General, said that 1 out of 2 Americans are feeling lonely, and it's going to take a spiritual awakening to change that. Thank you, Dr. Vivek. What do you think of that?
No, I think he's absolutely right. And
do you see a way that you could help here?
My job on this planet is to try and create awareness about a new way of tackling mental fragility, and that's by creating mental strength. I'm not against big pharmaceutical drugs. They're often absolutely critical. They're life-saving, but it doesn't solve the root cause of the problem, whether it's anxiety, whether it's ADHD symptoms, or whether it's limitations with reading ability. Whenever there's limitations in our cognitive processing, by far the fastest and most lasting result is to increase their mental strength. Because in every case, you can transform the root cause, and you transform not just the one symptom you're focusing on, you find a load of other symptoms. So every day I get messages from people that I worked with 15 years ago. So or 20 years ago, so this works and it lasts. I had one recently, a wonderful, wonderful lady rang me up to thank me. His son couldn't read, and now he's just finished his college degree. And she was thanking me, and she said, I've been following your research for quite a few years. I said, oh, when somebody says they're watching my research, who is this? She's a very famous neuroscientist at a very famous university. I better not mention her name because I haven't asked her permission for that.
Yeah.
And so she is now wanting to work with me to help with creating awareness about this. Mara, so many millions of lives could be transformed if they just knew there's alternatives to the conventional approach.
Amen.
And I know you're very spiritual. So that kind of makes me think about what a lot of people think was woo-woo. My work, some people thought my work was woo-woo until the neuroscientists start to explain everything I was saying about the cerebellum and how it increases mental capacity. So, the woo-woo glass ceiling has moved an awful long way in this last 20 years, and it's still got more to go.
Oh, a lot more, but yeah, and thank God, right? And yeah, definitely exciting times. I feel like we're living these biblical times, like lots of, the time of the Great Awakening, lots of big changes. So it's exciting. Let me ask you, as I know we have limited time left. So you mentioned that you're a board member of the Reach Institute. What is the Reach Institute, and tell us about that?
The Reach Institute is a wonderful charity. It's based in New York. It covers the whole of the US, and it's venturing into Canada too. It's run by some amazing people. It's headed up by Dr. Peter Jensen. He was professor at Columbia. He was head of child psychiatry for the National Institute of Mental Health. He was head of research at part of the Mayo Clinic for a while. This is a very formidable guy, and he is running the charity. His concern is the issues of mental health in schools is getting worse. Since COVID, it's got a lot worse again, and we have not got a fraction of the mental health resources. Children can be suicidal, and they can have to wait an awful long time before they can see a mental health specialist. So So that's the purpose of Reach, is to try and educate doctors and frontline medical practitioners. It's an amazing organization. They do some wonderful training. So I'm there as the I'm a board member of Reach, and I'm very honored to be working with them. My ultimate goal is that we can find ways of reaching all of these children when they are young, for several reasons. Some of them are suicidal. Once a child has taken its life, it's too late. But if they're just depressed, if they're just highly anxious, they cannot learn. You know, if a child is anxious going to school because of whatever, then their brain is flooded with cortisol, and you cannot learn when there's cortisol in the brain. So we're without the appropriate resources, without these issues being solved, we're building up a generation of children who are going to be far less educated than they could and should be. So that's my obsession. You know, with 4 children, I had one that was struggling. She is brighter today than anyone thought she ever could. In fact, I went to her headmistress a while back and I said, by the way, Mrs. Chitty, you taught Susie more than you ever realized. She thought I was joking. I said, no, Susie is reading and writing like a normal adult. And there was tears in her eyes, and she...
So beautiful. Oh my goodness. Thank you for all the work you do. What is the best way people want to get in touch with you, or they want to look into the Zing performance?
Well, yeah, there's a good website which explains everything, called Zing Performance, ZING performance.com. They can have a look at that. If they send a message to the helpline there and they particularly want to talk to me, then look, I cannot not help families that are facing these issues, because what happened to me with my own daughter has left a huge permanent scar that I'm always conscious of. So I never well, there are times when I literally run out of time, but I never refuse to talk to anyone. But I've got wonderful coaches there, and we've got an organization based in Florida covering North America. So we've got resources both sides of the Atlantic.
Beautiful. Well, Wynford, thank you. I'm sorry for what you went through, and thank you for turning it into such positive work to help heal our broken world, because we need people like you right now.
The universe put me through it. I accept that. I accept that this is my calling.
Absolutely. And we will list all of your information, the website and the link to your #1 Amazon bestseller book in the show information. So I just want to let everybody know that's watching, listening, and Wynford, you are amazing.
Thank you, Mara.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Let's Talk Wellness. This podcast has been brought to you by the Extraordinary Lives Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. If you would like to listen to more conversations like this, we invite you to subscribe to our mailing list at www.elfempowers.org to be notified when our episodes are published. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to bringing you our next conversation on Let's Talk Wellness.